All right, welcome back to another tutorial in Maya. Today, let's take a look at some undulating blobs and some weird twisty things and some deformers. What you see here is basically just a couple of, this is a simple sphere and this is a cube. And I've attached some deformers to them, and you can see where it's going to give you a lot of flexibility with doing various things. You can either create, some sort of abstract type of geometrical movement, or you can really control the shape of your modeling if you're modeling something with what's known as deformers. And we're going to be taking a look at this deformation tab, or basically all these little guys up here, or some of them. I'm not going to go over all of them, but we're going to take a look at most of them. So that's kind of what we're up to today. So you can see it's really cool. You can do all sorts of things with them. In this case, I've attached a twist to this cube, and then I've attached the cube to a motion path. And this is kind of what I'm getting, just sort of messing around. And in this case, this is a sphere, and I have a sine wave attached to this, or basically this guy right here is what is it? It's my nonlinear wave. Okay, and I basically animated the sphere to move up and down on its y-axis. So anyway, pretty easy, simple stuff, but you can see the possibilities this might have for doing some modeling or some really cool sort of abstract, deformations, or even taking a model and being able to, sort of do a cartoony squash and stretch and whatever you need it. So let's take a look at how to do this. We'll get into this tab. First, though, let's go take a look at Lester Banks, because remember, Lester is out there. Always coming up with good stuff. Got a whole bunch of After Effects, Maya, Blender, Soft Image. Okay, so go check out Lester. He's got stuff there for you all the time, every day. Okay, so let's basically get to it. Let's start a new scene. I'm going to go to File. Actually, let's get into Maya here, and I'll just sort of do a new scene. I don't need to save that. Okay, so first of all, let's just create a simple sphere, because we're going to be working with a sphere. And let's just create something else. Let's just create a cube. Nothing too major here. I'll just sort of randomly create something there. And I think in this case I might want to center this stuff out. I'll start with this guy, the sphere, and we'll just translate that back to 0 and that one to 0 and put it in the middle. Now that we have that in the middle, well, let's see. I'm going to move it up. No, I'm going to keep it in the middle, because what we're going to do is we're going to attach some stuff to this. I'm going to move this guy to the side for the moment, because we're not going to work with him. And let's actually bring our scale up just a little bit on here so we can see what's going on. All right. So that's cool. If you have an object and it's selected, all you have to do really is come up here into your deformation tab and just click on one of these. Now this one will create a lattice. This one is a wrap. It basically sort of groups stuff together. We're not going to be going over this one necessarily, but we'll get more to that later. Here's a nonlinear bend, which would basically just take an object like this and bend it. Here is some flaring that'll flare like an object out from the bottom or the top. And here we have a nonlinear sine, we have a squash, we have a twist, we have a wave, and then we have a deformer, a sculpted deformer, which is generally basically like a sphere that you chunk things out with, or form to a sphere. And then these we're not going to get into, so don't worry about these for the moment, because these have some other special qualities to them that we'll go over in some other tutorial. Okay, so in this case, this is a sphere. What would happen on this sphere if, say, like I gave it, let's start with something that would naturally be used on a sphere, which, yeah, maybe a squash. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my nonlinear squash right here. Well, you can see where the sphere is here, and I'm going to turn on my lines here, because sometimes it helps to have your your outlines on. And you'll notice that there's it added something called the squash handle. And I'm going to go into X-ray mode here, and you can see where that squash handle is. Basically, it has two different points. It has one on the top and one on the bottom. Well, if you come over into your tabs, into your attribute editor, you'll notice you have three different tabs. We have the handle, and here's squash 1. That's really what we're interested in, because these are the properties that we can vary a little bit. And you know, right now nothing is really happening because everything's set at default and we haven't really done anything yet. But you'll notice where you have the low bound and the high bound, and the low bound is referring to the lowest bound point, and the high bound is up here. So if by default high is set at 1, positive 1 up here, and low is set at negative 1 there. So let's just say that I bring the low bound down a little bit, down to there. Okay, you don't see any changes happening right now because we're really not doing any deformations. That's just to kind of show you kind of where, you know, you can vary where your boundaries are for this effect. Okay, so that's the low bound. I'm going to go ahead and set that back to 1. And the same thing goes with the high bound. You know, you can see that one moving. Let's go out here a little bit. You can see that one moving up and down. Well, they're not having an effect yet, but let's make them have an effect. That's just to kind of know that they're there. So those are what those are. Now let's add some expansion and a factor. The first thing I like to do maybe is just go ahead and put a little bit of factor on there. Okay, like let's say we set our factor at 0.500, just to kind of get used to what is going to happen here. Well, you can see where, you know, it's doing some weird things. My low bound should be at -1. I'm going to reset that to -1. I don't know if I messed that up. So now you can see by adding that factor how that affected it. So, you know, here's our factor. And you can see where it's squishing. It's sort of pulling this stuff up and squishing it up and down. So I'm going to take my, I'm going to go back into normal mode there. And let's do some factor now. Let's squish it up, squish it down. You know, you can see where you could animate this over time. So you know, remember that any of these variables are over time. You can mess with them. So let's just sort of stay with it like that. I'm going to set my factor back down to 0 here, and it should just give me a sphere and 0 it out. My expansion, you'll notice where that was because my factor was up here. If I work with this expansion now, I can sort of expand and contract that from side to side or all the way around. Really cool. Okay, and then the maximum expansion position is, I'm going to have to go back into this mode right here. And let's look at this max expand position. I'm going to see if I can get out here a little bit more. I'm going to bring this low bound down a little bit, or up a little bit, excuse me, and I'm going to bring my high bound down a little bit. And let's see if we can get there. So here's my expand, okay? And you can see where by messing around with the positioning of your high bound and low bound that you now can expand and contract just that area. All right? And the maximum position is where it is on the bottom or the top. So I'm going to get out of X-ray mode here, and let's look at this max expand, and let's sort of go, there it is at the bottom, there it is kind of in the middle, and there it is kind of at the top. So anyway, you get the idea. You just got to play around with these things quite a bit. And start smoothness to end smoothness is just, you'll see what happens when you move these around. There it's at 0. Here it sort of starts smoothing things out a little bit more toward the top. So you can kind of vary your smoothness along your edges. The ending smoothness would be this part up here. So let's just move that around. And there you go. That's pretty much it. That's all that you got to know about squashing. These are your various controls right here. So you can just sort of mess around with them a bunch. Now, under the deformer attributes, you'll have an envelope, and you can sort of take your envelope off, which means that none of this is having an effect on your object now. So if I want to have it have maximum effect, I might move it to there. So that's cool. So I'm going to go into object mode for a second and just show you. I'm going to switch over to my move tool. Now I'm going to move this up and down. And as I move this up and down over the deformer, you can see where it sort of picks up those characteristics that are inherent with that deformer. So there we go. I'm going to smooth this object. I'm going to hit 3 on the keyboard, just give it a little bit more smoothness. And so now you can see where it's smoothed out, looking cool. Okay. So let's do this. Let's move. Let's sort of keyframe a couple of motions for this. I'll just make it go up and down on its y-axis. But I also want to keyframe maybe my expansion and contraction. All right, so let's just set a couple of keyframes for this thing to expand and contract. Let's start all the way out like that. And I'm going to bring my object down here for a second. And, you know, just set your timeline for maybe about like 300 frames or something like that. And go back to frame number 1. Right mouse click on your expand and set a key. And in this case, let's just come forward. Let's see here. Yeah, let's come forward to about maybe 50 frames. And maybe expand it a little bit or pull it up and contract it, I guess, in this case. And then right mouse click, set key. And we'll just sort of, you know, do that a bunch of times. Move forward. We'll set a key back here to 0. We'll move forward a bit more in the timeline. Maybe, you know, just expand it or contract it a bit there. We'll set a key. Come forward here a little bit. Maybe bring it down. All right, bring it down to there. We'll set a key. And we'll come back up here to the end and maybe squish it up here. And we'll go ahead and set key. So now, when I run through the simulation here, it kind of looks like that thing's breathing. You know? So that's a real cool way to kind of add, you know, some kind of squishy motion. So there you go. That's all, pretty much all on this one for the moment. So let's work on maybe our cube over here. I'm going to take this cube and let's attach something else to this cube. I think I might want to just make it a little bit longer, and we'll go with this twist. The twist is really cool. Let's see, where's our twist? There it is, right there. I'm going to go ahead and click twist, and I'll go ahead and go into my you know, mode there. And come over here into my tab. It should say twist 1. Make sure in your attribute editor. Here you got the same thing, high bound, low bound, and a start angle. Well, I'm going to leave my bounding the same on this just to keep my geometry consistent. But my start angle, I'll leave it 0. And my end angle, I think I'll set to just say like 180. We'll just make it do a 180 twist. Okay? So as I did that, you'll see where it sort of, you know, angles up to what it might be. So there's 180. You could vary your twist either way. You can, and remember, you can animate these twists too. So I think what I might do is just keep it there for a second, and I might hit number 3 on the keyboard and smooth that out a little bit. And I think I'll make my end angle again at say 180. And there we go. So now we have a twist, but it's not really doing much. So, you know, we might want to do something with this twist. You know, we may want to move this twist around or something like that. I think we'll just leave it there for a moment because I want to show you something with attaching this stuff now to say like a motion path. So let me cruise around here for a second, and I'll go ahead and create a just a regular NURB circle, and I'll just drag on the grid there somewhere. And I'll stay with it like that, and make sure you're in your animation menu set, go to your animate, and oh, actually we have to select this object. Okay, so we select that object first and we'll select our path. Now we can animate, come down to motion paths and attach to motion path. Well, wow, it got all wonky. Look at that. So let's see what it looks like just sort of, you know, going around. Well, it's kind of doing its thing like it was before. The object attached to the motion path, and now it's following the motion path, but it's also, you know, connected to this twist. So this twist is having a weird effect on it, but it levels out when it gets closer. So remember, you can always sort of change up your positioning on all sorts of stuff. For example, if I choose this object, or actually let me choose this. We'll go back to the beginning. And let's maybe make this twist a little bit more like that, and maybe bring it down a little bit up that way. Might be able to pull it out that way. I mean, you can see what it's doing there. It's twisting around all over the place. So you can do stuff like that. You can also move this this deformer a little bit more like that. And let's see, maybe move it into the middle a little more. And all right, so now let's see what it looks like. Kind of cutting through that object, but you know, you get the idea. You can sort of make weird stuff happen with geometry. And that's really cool. You could spend hours, days doing this with deformers. So, okay, so we got those two. Those are really cool. Let's work on something else. I think what I'll do is just do a new scene. I'm going to go to File, New Scene, and I'm not going to save anything there. And I'm going to go ahead and just create, like, say, a polygon. Let's create another cube. We'll do a cube, and I'll make kind of a long, thin cube. All right. Maybe something like that, and I'll go into shaded mode. I'm going to select that cube, and let's attach this guy to it, our wave, nonlinear wave. You're not seeing anything at the moment, and let's go into X-ray mode. You'll see a line like right along here, and really, in order to get anything from here, we have to raise the amplitude a little bit. And once we do that, you can see where that line, that starts to have an effect. So it can either go positive or negative or wherever you want. Right now, I think what I'll do is just, I'll put a little bit of amplitude on it, but let's mess around with this wavelength. You can either, move the wavelength out to a real long wavelength, or we can shorten it up and have quite a few more going on in there. And now in order to see this a little better, I'm going to go ahead and turn off that. And I think I might just select that and hit 3 and smooth this out a little bit. Makes it easier to see. Okay, so there it is. There's a deformation on a surface, which is kind of cool because you can use this deformer to make landscapes or whatever. All I would have to do is I'm going to increase this wavelength a little bit more. I'm just going to bring it down here a little bit more. Okay. All right, now if I like the way that might look for, say, a landscape, I could just come up and do an edit and do a duplicate, and I'd have it. It would be just a mesh that would be perfectly duplicated just like it's been deformed. And this deformer no longer has an effect on this, so that's cool. But watch this. If you want to animate a landscape or animate a surface or something like that, if you choose your wave here, we can basically move that wave back and forth over the surface, and you can see where this surface is now sort of picking up those deformations. So that's really cool. So remember, you can animate this maybe right here, this wave 1. If I would just animate the overall motion of where that's going, you might want to pick the handle, and in this case we're translating over X, and right now it's at there. So why don't I just start a key there, right mouse click, select a key, and then maybe go up to the end of the animation and have this thing sort of move its way through there, and go ahead and right mouse click and key selected. Now, that's pretty rapid, but we should set this at more like 300 frames. All right. So I'd have to rekey the frame this to go a little slower. So with that selected, I could just go to Edit and then Keys, and delete those keys. And now I can reanimate this from, say, where it's at now, and come to my end at 300, move it. Let's move this up to, like, say there, and then just re-keyframe it, key selected. All right, now it's moving through a little more slowly, but you can see where, this little guy can make a difference. Now, you can also do this with deformers. You can also keyframe, say, like this amplitude. If I select my handle there and get into my attributes here, I can set this wavelength. I can say vary this. I can start it at frame 1. I could put a keyframe on that wavelength and go to set key. And I can bring this all the way down to here, and then maybe say that this wavelength tapers off to, like, say 0 or something. I'll just maybe set it to 0 there, and let's see, it doesn't look right, but nope, that's 0.1. Yeah, let's just say we set it to there by the very end, and I'll set a key. Now as it plays through there, it'll start to even out and go slower over time, do some stuff, so you get the idea. Very cool, huh? All right, and there it is. Okay, so once again, the envelope, that is how much of the effect is applied, and there we go. So play around with your minimum radius, maximum radius. Let's see, sometimes you need to be in your X-ray mode to see what's going on. Your minimum radius is going to bring that down. If you take this minimum radius up, you're actually setting your minimum to something huge like that, and your maximum, you know, goes out proportionately. So if you need more room on either end or whatever, that's pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to delete that, and here was our surface. It's been deformed and whatnot. That's very cool. And yeah, so if that were, you know, say a landscape, and I were to do a quick render, boom, instant landscape. All right, now let's look at maybe something else. Let's look at we've got our twist, we had our squash. Let's maybe try a bend on this landscape. I'll go ahead and you can attach more than one to an object. So I'm going to go ahead and add a bend to that. But I'm also going to select this object and add like a taper, all right, or a flare. And I'm going to go over my flare, and you'll see where, you know, technically we don't have that much room to flare, but I'm going to say make this a little larger like that. And now I can select my object, look at that I'm in my flare, and I'm going to start, it has a start of the flare X, start of flare Z, end of flare X, end of flare Z. So I think what I'll do is I'll put the start at 1 and I'll end the flare at maybe say like 2, and we'll just see what happens, and I'll go 2 there. All right, so it kind of made it into, flared it out from the bottom into sort of like more of a, yeah, whatever. But let's say we move these up to 4. I'm going to go ahead and hit 4 there, and flare 4, and boom. So there we go. We have flaring going on. So you can see where flaring sort of, you know, gives you a flare on something. And that's pretty cool. So now that we got that, let's see if we can mess around with, you know, our, let's see, our scale or our curvature. If you were to say, you know, curve it inward, you can give it an inward curve. If you want to go out, you can go out. You know, high bound and low bound is pretty much the same thing. Just play around with your high boundary and your low boundary a lot, and you'll get some various results. And there we go. So that's kind of what flaring is. And you can do this with any object. So now that I have that, I think what I'll do is attach a, we'll work with our bend. I know that we attached a bend here, and we'll see if we can bend this whole plane around a bit. You want to make sure you select your tab over here, that when you select, this automatically doesn't show up. Sometimes you have to make sure it's in bend right there. And let's just give it some curvature. All right, so now I'm curving. All right, and this might not be the best object to show you what a curve is, but let's see if I can just get rid of everything there. I'm going to come down and I'm going to create a cube, and I'm going to go ahead and assign that curve to it, and there it is. Let's look at it like that. Yep, it's in there. And let's look at our bend, and now I'm going to curve it. All right, and as you can see, I'm going to hit 3 on the keyboard, select that, hit 3, smooth it out a little bit. The high bound and low bound are, you know, going to have an effect as to where, you know, where that high boundary is and low boundary. Now the curvature, you can see, does exactly what it should be doing. It's sort of curving it around. It's already attached this like wire deformer to this object, and as you move your curve around, there you go. Okay, so that's pretty much it. You know, yeah, you can play around with your envelope, take it all the way off or take it all the way on. So you get the idea. Very, very good stuff. You know, you can move a curve down through an object and get that. So it's all about keyframing, imagination, and working with deformers. All right. Okay, so I think we've gone on for way too long, but you know, we got it all in there. Looked at some deformers, and you know, I'm gonna hit. I think what I'll do is go here to like new scene. Oh, actually, let's try something right now. Let's take this object right here, and let's attach a last one, a lattice to that. So now I have a lattice around, my object. I can go ahead and select that lattice, go right mouse click, go to lattice point, and now I can pick, some various lattice points around here to do other things with. If you wanted to form something out like that, great. Maybe pick these, move them up a little bit, move them out a little bit. I don't know. But that's the lattice. You can always work with lattices around any object kind of this same way. Just grab some vertexes and there you go. So now if I were to just take this object and move it up and down over this, it'd pick up the shape of the lattice, and it would also pick up the shape of that curve deformer. So there's nothing precise about what I'm doing here, but it will have a big effect on things, if you have logical geometry to kind of create, to squash, deform, bend, or whatever. So let's say that's a part for my model. I might want to just use that as a modeling part, and I might want to just duplicate it and move it up and off to the side and save it out as an OBJ or something. So there you go. Pretty easy stuff. Play around with deformers. They're a lot of fun. You can get a lot of crazy stuff. So there you go. Have a great weekend. Be a good person. Read a book. And, as always, stop back for the next tutorial. All right. Thanks for watching.